Hey, what's up? This is Ryan, CEO of Applicant Pro, with today's hiring tip. We're going to talk a little bit about application metrics and honestly hiring metrics as a whole. But this video is part of a series of videos on metrics. And so try to keep it short and sweet. We've broken these down into specific chunks or specific areas because personally, I believe that's how you should work with metrics. You should break them down into smaller and smaller areas until you get to the point there's only a couple inputs. And when there's only a couple inputs or only a couple of factors on a metric, then it becomes really clear what things you should do to improve. So today's video, we're going to talk specifically about job application metrics. And so let's start off with why. Like, why are we tracking them? So this is an awesome quote that, shows up all over the place, but you can't improve what you don't measure, period. Now, you could say, no, I could totally get better at something without measuring it, but how would you know that you got better? You'd be basically saying, well, in my gut, it feels like things are getting better. And honestly, that doesn't work. There's a reason why we have report cards in school. There's a reason why we get grades. There's a reason why we have metrics and data. It's a reason why we keep score when we play sports, right? So if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So you need to measure something. The second part is I go around, talk to a lot of SHRM groups, and we talk about metrics a lot. And we also talk about being strategic or having a seat at the table. And simply put, most departments that get respect from management have data and metrics behind what they're doing. And most managers that get respect can show progress against their goals and how things are improving. And so metrics are super important. Now, a lot of you, especially in HR, might be a little freaked out that we're talking about math today. And this equation probably gives you some stress. It's just an algebra equation. And if you think about it, although an algebra equation can get really big and long and difficult, at its core, it really is a bunch of little small equations. So for instance, if I told you that x equaled 3 here, you could easily take and divide up each of these equations into much smaller equations that pretty much like an 8-year-old could do. And so that's the same way we want to look at metrics. So today we're going to talk about applicant flow. And so I've actually taken the applicant flow process and broke it into kind of a 4-step equation. And if we break it into this equation, then we can focus on each area individually. When you break it down into each area, it will become super clear what's wrong and how to improve it. And we've got additional videos that you can watch on each of these areas so that you can have ideas. So the number one part is you want to measure each of these areas. Number one, how many people are viewing your job ad? Number two, how many people are starting an application? Number three, how many complete an application? And number four, of the people who complete an application, how many are qualified? Now you want to be able to track this by job as well as by time period. Couple ways that you can track this. One option on your career site would be to install Google Analytics. We're not going to go deep into that today. We'll have another video about it. But if you install Google Analytics, it would show you number of job ad views, app starts, and completed apps. I'm going to show you some ways that Applicant Pro tracks it in a minute here. But once you have these 4 numbers, you can then do some simple math to divide them to get the metric here. So if you divide the application starts by the number of job ad views, it will give you a percentage. And that percentage is how many people who viewed the ad actually started an application. Honestly, the going rate on that is around 10% or less, meaning over 90% of people who view a job ad leave without applying. Next one, if you divide completed applications by application starts, you get a percentage that's your application complete rate. That's what percentage of people who start applying to the job actually finish applying. Once again, the data on that across the board is somewhere between 40 to 60% of people who start an application don't actually finish the application. And so once again, there's a huge amount of potential in there. And then finally, the percentage of applicants who are qualified. Now, this one is a little bit elusive and we want to be careful with it. The core goal of the application process is to generate a high number of qualified applicants. And so it's possible that we may have a high percentage of our applicants who are not qualified, and that's okay as long as the total number of qualified applicants is high, right? And so if you look at each of these metrics, so we've got 4 data points and 3 percentage points. These are the core kind of metrics as you're trying to improve the flow through the application process. I actually have a spreadsheet that you can request a download for. If you go visit applicantpro.com/tools, or in the video you're watching down in the comments, I'll put a link that you can download this spreadsheet and manually fill in this data yourself. You would fill it in from information on Google Analytics, or however else, maybe your applicant tracking system has this information. And so what you can do is by job, and I would choose a month period, you can enter in how many views, how many people started. It will automatically compute your start rate. How many people applied, like completed applications, it will automatically compute your complete rate. And how many of those were qualified, and it will compute your qualified rate. It will then sum it up across the bottom. Now, why is this important? Well, because this is the starting point. Before we can start making improvement, we actually have to track what we've been doing in the past and what our data points are, so we know where to focus and what things we can do to improve. Let me kind of show you what it looks like in Applicant Pro. In our system, we automatically have this data tracked by job, by period of time. So I can take a look at the last 30 days and I can see how many people viewed versus start versus complete. If I uncheck, I can actually see number of applicants versus number of qualified applicants. Again, this last one's a little bit elusive because the real goal here is number of qualified applicants. We want to get as many qualified applicants as possible for our jobs, and qualification is based on job questions, right? In our system, it's based on, did they meet the qualifications by answering the job questions right? And so that's how we set it. And so that's kind of the core tracking. Now we can look at that and say, well, what are the potential problems? Well, let me cue you in on a few of the potential problems here. So number one, here's another graphic to look at: views versus starts. So if a whole bunch of people, in this case, if 90% of people view the job ad and don't apply, it basically means there's a problem with the job ad. So if we start, if nobody views the job ad, then we have a marketing problem, right? We're not advertising the job properly. If a bunch of people view the job ad and don't apply, then we have a job ad problem. Now, certainly a percentage of people who view the job ad are not going to apply ever. They're not qualified for the job, and that's totally fine. But 90% of people viewing these job ads are looking at it and deciding that it's not that interesting. So that's, we have videos on this, but that means the job ad's bad. If a high percentage of people, 30% of people who start an application aren't completing, it could be a problem with the application process. Maybe the application is too long. Maybe some of the questions you're asking are offensive. If you're asking for social security numbers and dates of birth, if you're asking for references, we have a whole video on optimizing this, but this is a great example, right? Where starts versus complete. We actually have one final report here. This report shows where of that completion rate, where people are falling out of the application process. If you have a multi-step application process on your career site or on your applicant tracking system, and you install Google Analytics, you should be able to get similar data to this that will show you which page of the application people are leaving on. And then you can go and analyze that one page and say, well, are we asking them questions they don't know the answers to? Are we asking them for information they don't have? For instance, this employment history, you see a high exit rate on employment. Well, maybe we're asking for the phone number and the street address of their previous employers, and maybe they don't have that information available. And if we're not using it, then we should stop asking it. So anyway, so that's kind of the metrics of the application flow process. Step one, you got to track it before you start making changes and improving, before you go and start listening to our other videos about improving your job ads or advertising in different places or improving the application process. The very first step is you've got to have some data. You've got to track and have metrics. So as you start making changes, you can see the progress, so that you can go to your boss or you can go to your management team and say, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and here's the results it's having. But hope you have a great day and good luck hiring.